So recently, it seems like everybody is talking about parries in video games. And it makes sense. Two really big games came out recently for genres that don't usually have parries, and they have parries as one of their main mechanics. And that's Doom the Dark Ages and Clair Obscur. But it's been really interesting seeing how parries are being added to so many different games as one of their main mechanics. And I kind of just wanted to talk about it and analyze it and talk about the strengths and weaknesses of the mechanic. Especially because I did work as a combat designer on a game that is primarily based around parries with Star Wars Jedi Survivor. So first, I want to define parries. So a parry usually is a mechanic where a player can, if timed correctly, press a button and then stop an attack from an enemy. This is different from a block because usually a block is a sustained pressed button. So you hold down the block button and you mitigate some or all incoming damage. And it makes sense why this mechanic is so beloved. It was really popularized with Sekiro. And parries have existed for a really long time before Sekiro. You know, it was in fighting games with this famous clip. But recently, I think because of Sekiro, more and more things have been putting it in because there's a lot of strengths to the mechanics. One of the main strengths is that it gives a gradient of success for the player or a progression of skill for the player. So if there's an incoming attack from the enemy, there's a couple of different options that the player can do usually. So the easiest thing you could do is just stand there. You'll take full damage, and that is the worst possible thing you could do. You're not good at timing or positioning. One level better than that is blocking. So you have just enough skill to know when to block. You'll take some punishment, but you won't take all of it. So you're slightly rewarded for having slightly more skill and knowing when to press the block button. The next level past that is usually dodging. So that means you have the awareness to know when to dodge, but also know where to dodge. Maybe you'll dodge forward, backward, left or right. This means that you're rewarded even more for being good at positioning and timing. Because you are usually dodging away from the enemy, you're not getting an advantage from a positional standpoint. You're actually losing ground positionally. And you're maybe being set back to neutral because the enemy will have attacked, no damage was done. You will have dodged, no damage was taken. So now the situation is exactly the same as before. And the highest skill thing you could do, the highest skill, the highest risk, and the highest reward is a parry. You are directly in the line of getting hit and taking that damage from the enemy. But also, if you time it just perfectly, then you will deflect all damage, but also you'll deal some punishment to the enemy. You'll get a reward. So in Sekiro, for example, you'll deal some posture damage. That means you're making some progress towards defeating the enemy, and you're positionally advantageous because you're still right in front of the enemy and you can respond however you want. So because of this, it makes sense that a lot of games want to add a parry because it has this natural growth of when you're starting to fight and when you're starting the game, you're kind of just dodging or blocking, but then as you get better and as you learn the enemy's attacks, you start parrying more often and you get better and you get good at the game, and you're really taking down bosses and enemies with precision because you're learning the animation styles of things. You can kind of see this progression between dodging and parrying in Clair Obscur as well. And as you're learning how to play the game, they add more and more versions and more types of parries and more types of dodges, similar to the Bakiri counter in Sekiro. There's always that like way to progress your skill and exercise your skill on the enemy. I mean, you can totally see that in any Ongball clips. Those are just basically like parry god. Another big reason that games have started to put in parries is that it's really helped add this fantasy aspect to some games. So for Sekiro, there is that fantasy of those movie scenes and those movie fight scenes where they're clashing swords and there's like that constant back and forth and you hear the clanging of metal. And Sekiro uses the parry system and the posture system to kind of like perfectly translate that fantasy into mechanics. And I think you can say the exact same thing for Jedi as well. In the Star Wars movies, lightsabers clashing against each other is one of the most iconic parts of that series. So in the game, you are encouraged to block and parry your opponent, and the other lightsaber enemies will also parry you. So there's like this constant back and forth dance when you're fighting the enemies. And with this skill ceiling and with the fantasy of parrying, I think what's really attractive about it is that it makes the player feel so cool and like such a badass. And I think that many games are searching for that feeling to give to the player, that power fantasy, without just kind of handing them the keys to the fantasy. However, there are some weaknesses to the mechanic if it's not utilized properly in the game. So one of the main things that I feel like not a lot of people think about is the enemy side of parries. So it can be a little difficult sometimes to parry if the enemy windups and the enemy antics are not clear when you should be parrying and when you should be pressing these buttons. And I personally found it a little difficult sometimes in Clair Obscur because the animations are sometimes rate scaled, or the animations are a little fuzzy of when the hit frames are coming out. I don't know when to press the button, so I sometimes feel a little bit cheated if I don't hit it, or if I feel like I should have hit it because it looked like that's when the hit frames are about to come out. So there's like that inconsistency that can be tough sometimes if the antic animations aren't perfectly spot on and they don't feel good. And sometimes some games will use that against you intentionally. So Elden Ring is kind of infamous for that, where the bosses will wind up and there's like this natural time in which they're going to bring it down, but then they keep winding up and they keep winding up and they keep doing weird little poses to bait you into rolling or bait you into parrying. So I think that stuff is okay. It's when it's unintentional and it's a little fuzzy that it's hard for the player to know what does success look like and what does failure look like when I'm interacting with the parry mechanic. The other side is that, you know, when I talked about how if you get good at parries, sometimes you get some sort of reward or you're punishing the enemy in some ways. Sometimes if the reward is too high, it can basically trivialize the game, because if you are good enough at parries like Ongball, you can just stand there and just press one button and that's all you engage with in the game. So for example, there's a game called AI Limit where when you parry an enemy's attacks, it completely staggers them and puts them into a reaction for like multiple seconds at a time. And because of this, you can basically just walk around, press one button, and then just, if you're good enough with parries, just steamroll all over the bosses in this game. So instead of the combat system being this big, multi-layered, multifaceted thing, it becomes walk up to enemy, press button at the right time. Now that's especially a big issue if the parry window is really large. That's one of the things I experienced with Doom: The Dark Ages, where even when playing on harder difficulties, it felt like the parry window was really large. So I never really struggled to get parries in, and it was mostly just about moving over to the green projectiles to parry them. So there's always a balancing act with how much reward a player should be getting from the parry mechanic. It's possible to try to mitigate this on the enemy side, like unparryable attacks or like grab attacks in fighting games, which will go through parries and blocks. So yeah, like with all systems and all different types of mechanics, parries can be used well or not. And I think that with the inclusion of them in many mainstream and modern games, I think that the language of parries is being disseminated through the just general culture of video games. And I think that part is really, really awesome. It gives the designers a lot more skill bandwidth to kind of show the player a lot of different things that they can do to engage with the system. But that always needs to be balanced to make sure that it doesn't become trivialized if it's too rewarding. I personally love parries, and anytime there's a parry in a game, that is what I'm doing, just mastering it and trying to get good at it, and just like, that is just so satisfying. But I totally understand also if players don't want to engage with that and want to do different things, and I think that is totally understandable as well. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and yeah, talk to you later. Peace.